Is enlightenment a sudden, all-at-once event? Or is it something that gradually unfolds over time? This question is hugely important because it has tremendous implications for how we approach spirituality and spiritual practice. If we assume that enlightenment is something that happens only after a prolonged period of practice where we have to clean up our minds, where we have to develop concentration and insight, then of course my starting assumption is that I am somehow not ready yet. Right now, in this instance, I am still this being which has to somehow approach enlightenment. And if I get purified enough, if I develop enough insight, then eventually I will have this breakthrough where everything will become clear and I will either move into a new state of being or recognize something which was previously seemingly blocked from me. And I don't want to dismiss this kind of approach entirely. It certainly has several advantages to it. For one, when we approach awakening and enlightenment in this kind of gradual fashion, then we don't dismiss conventional reality. We understand that it matters how we behave in our regular day-to-day life. It matters whether we are ethical, whether we give in to destructive emotions, whether we treat others humanely with respect. Just our general approach to life has to be guided accordance to some kind of wisdom if we are on this gradual approach. The huge disadvantage of this approach, however, is that there is this underlying assumption that we have to become something that isn't already present. We have to move, shift into some new state of consciousness which is not already here right now. Or maybe we have to develop some new kind of way of being where we can recognize what's already so. But the assumption is that we don't have this capacity right now, right here. And of course, approaching enlightenment with this kind of framework can feel extremely limiting and defeating, because every day, every moment of your life is sort of evidence of your unenlightenment. There's always the sense that you're not there yet, you're seeking, you haven't found it yet. And naturally, that can be quite stressful. It can perpetuate this illusion that what you are essentially is something that is not free, that is bounded, finite, and limited. So what's the antidote to that? Is there an alternative that doesn't have this pitfall? Well, a different approach would be to say that enlightenment happens instantaneously. It doesn't have any special requirements. It's available right here, right now. And when this is recognized, when your true nature is recognized, then the whole seeking journey stops. It becomes obvious that what reality essentially is and what you essentially are is beyond birth and death, doesn't happen on a timeline, is not limited, doesn't have a self at the center of it. It is therefore centerless and unbounded. And this recognition of our true nature can happen in an instant. In fact, even an instant is misleading, because when this recognition happens, it doesn't happen in the context of a timeline. And so, in a very real sense, we could then say, we are done here. There's nothing left to realize. It is seen and recognized that this whole dream of being a separately existing entity was just an illusion all along. It was never actually real. And of course, this realization can be tremendously liberating. But at the same time, there's a huge pitfall there, a trap which you can fall into. We can assume that because our true nature, reality in of itself, is already free, unbounded, and centerless, and therefore nothing is left to be done, nothing matters in some essential way. We can totally dismiss conventional reality and therefore become attached to the idea that nothing matters in the realm of human beings and situations and ethical behavior. But even just in a purely spiritual realm of realization, we can also make the mistake of assuming that what has been recognized about our true nature is the final recognition. That's all there is to notice. That's all there is to recognize. And again, because of this assumption, we stagnate. We can get stuck in a kind of halfway stage where we believe that we have reached the final goal and therefore nothing needs to be done. After all, everything is just empty. So what could be improved upon? Another disadvantage of this kind of sudden realization approach is that whenever we feel any kind of sense of separation, we assume that we are not there yet, that we still have to wait for this grand awakening where everything suddenly becomes clear. So similarly to the gradual approach, the sudden approach can also cause tremendous frustration, because anytime there is evidence of our seeming unenlightenment, we think that we haven't gotten it yet. We have to wait for this sudden flash where everything will just become obvious. And so in that sense, this sudden approach to awakening can also cause, just like the gradual approach, tremendous amounts of frustration, because the sense of not having gotten it yet can be very strong and cause a lot of suffering. So is there a different approach to enlightenment? Is there an approach which doesn't have this pitfall of thinking that we are not already this perfect freedom, but also doesn't neglect and dismiss this conventional level of reality? In my view, the answer to this question is yes. There very much is an approach which doesn't have either of those disadvantages. And we can call this approach sudden awakening and gradual cultivation. So what does that mean? So sudden awakening refers to the fact that the nature of our experience is realized in a timeless instant. The fact that our true nature is centerless and unbounded can become recognized in a flash. But nevertheless, we can acknowledge that, in a different sense, this realization needs to be cultivated. So how does it make sense to cultivate an insight about something that is already perfect? Well, we can make sense of this in at least two ways. For one, it's the case that just because this inherent centerless perfection of our true nature has been recognized, it doesn't mean that all the limiting beliefs we have about the nature of this reality drop away instantaneously. We can still have very limiting beliefs about what the nature of our experience is. We can, for example, still have the sense that experience takes place on a kind of timeline, that there is a past, a future, and a present in an essential way. We can also assume that our true nature takes the shape of a concretely existing outside world, and therefore overlook the fact that all these phenomena of our experience are totally indefinable. We can still have the sense that the mind is somehow needed for this recognition of reality to take place. And those are just a few of the beliefs which can still persist even after there has been this recognition of our true nature. And so while each of these recognitions happen in a timeless instant, it is nevertheless true to say that these recognitions don't just happen once. They happen again and again and again, and always reveal something new about our true nature. There's always a new depth to be plunged, so to say. We never arrive at any kind of final awakening in this sense, because what we really are and what our true nature essentially is just has this infinite depth to it. Because it is unresolvable, we can never say that we have recognized what it finally is, what the ultimate nature of our true nature is. And so in that sense, these sudden realizations about the nature of our experience get cultivated gradually, and the limiting beliefs we have about what our true nature is also fall away gradually. But there's also a different way in which you can speak of gradual cultivation. We have to remember that this body-mind system has been conditioned into taking our interpretations of reality to be absolutely real. We have therefore been conditioned into a kind of limiting belief system. And subsequently, there were very specific patterns of thinking and feeling and relating to the world that were ingrained into the system. And these patterns are usually felt as neurotic, destructive tendencies of behavior, of feeling, and of relating. These patterns don't just dissolve in one glimpse of ultimate reality. And anybody who has had this kind of glimpse can attest to this fact. It's very much the case that these patterns of ignorance, if we want to call them that, persist. They can still become triggered and activated depending on the circumstances we find ourselves in. And so again, there is this process of gradual cultivation where these kinds of neurotic fixations and attachments get cleared out of the system over time. The tremendous difference, however, when it comes to this gradual cultivation, is that we don't approach it from this idea that we are somehow limited and finite and imperfect, and we have to purify ourselves in order to realize the perfection of what we already are. Since we have recognized that this is not the case, that what we essentially are is already free and unbounded, we can bring this recognition into this relative realm of the body-mind and use this recognition to, relatively speaking, clear out all these patterns of neuroticism and ignorance. So this gradual cultivation in this case has a very different feel to it, because all along the way it's apparent to us that what we essentially are is already this unbounded, centerless, dynamic freedom, this perfection. And we don't have to do anything to become that. It's already the case. And because of that, this gradual unfolding is not felt as this limiting burden. It's just a natural unburdening that can happen when this recognition of the absolute is brought into the realm of the relative body-mind. And again, this is something that is truly open-ended. I mean, at what stage would you say that you are now the perfect embodiment of realization? Any kind of judgment of that would rely on conventional reality. And conventional reality is always defined by our own views. So drop the idea of ever reaching any kind of stage of perfect embodiment. Just allow this recognition of our inherent perfection to express itself, to show up in the way that is just right. If anything about this remains unclear, you can contact me through my website, which is linked in the description. You will also find different links there where you can support me if you enjoy what I do here on this channel. Other than that, you can also leave a comment under the video if you want to ask any questions, and subscribe if you want to stay up to date with my latest videos. Thanks for watching, and I will see you right here next time.